10 years ago, in May 2013, EA signed a deal with Disney and Lucasfilm for the exclusive rights to create Star Wars games for the next 10 years, meaning that they were the only ones allowed to create AAA Star Wars games to be released on the main platforms. The only things excluded from this was LEGO Star Wars games and mobile games, which were still allowed to be made by other developers. Obviously, we had a bit of a rocky road with EA, as during these 10 years we got 6 games in total: Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order and Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Squadrons, and lastly Galaxy of Heroes. These 10 years had a lot of ups and downs. Obviously, we got some great games, but we also had some controversies with the release of Battlefront 2, multiple cancelled Star Wars projects, and just simply a lack of games overall, as people had expected more during these 10 years. I would argue that overall it has been a bit of a flop with this deal. What I mean with that is not the individual projects, as a lot of them were really good. I still think Battlefront 2, Fallen Order, Squadrons, Jedi Survivor are some of the best Star Wars games to ever come out, especially Battlefront 2 in its current state, so those were fantastic. But the exclusivity part of it all was a flop. Because if we would not have had that deal, we could have had all of those amazing games, plus probably twice as many from other publishers too. It is simply too big of a task for one publisher to be responsible for all of the Star Wars games to be made, and it also doesn't make a lot of sense if you're not able to capitalize on all different types of game genres and such. So what about the deal then? Didn't that end 2 years ago? No, the thing is, the deal probably ended right now. Maybe last week, or we don't know exactly what date in May 2013 that this deal was struck. But the 10-year deal should have ended this very moment. Because 2 years ago, when Lucasfilm announced that they were partnering with multiple other studios and publishers to make Star Wars games, they had already made the decision to not extend the exclusivity rights with EA, obviously, but that EA were still allowed to continue creating Star Wars games. This was just great news all around, as it meant we got the best of both worlds. We still continue to get the EA Star Wars games we wanted, like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, but we also got multiple other projects announced, and now have like 8 or 9 games in the works, and only 2 of those are made by EA. But Andy, who works over at EA, actually made it clear around that time that the deal that EA had with Star Wars was still there, and it will run out when it runs out, which means that the reason to why they announced this was probably that Lucasfilm and Disney knows that making games takes years. So they made the decision 2 or 3 years ago that, okay, we're not going to extend the exclusivity rights, we're going to allow everyone to make Star Wars games, including EA, but let's give them some time to actually make these games before the deal ends. So that's why they went out with this announcement and allowed other developers to create these games. Because like you might have noticed, it's still only EA who has released any Star Wars games the last couple of years. And that's actually because they've still only been the ones allowed to release the Star Wars games. So does that mean that the floodgates are gonna open up now that the deal is officially over? Probably not, because as much as I wish that was true, I think the longest any of the Star Wars games have been in the works, like Ubisoft's, is probably 2.5 years or such, which is enough to make a decent game, but they probably don't want to rush it. So I don't even think we're gonna get any more Star Wars games this year, as much as I would love to have that. And realistically, the deal with EA ending this month probably doesn't have a lot of big implications, as I don't think any other publisher has been able to finish their Star Wars game up until this date. It would have been really cool though. Imagine if the second the deal ended this month, we'd had 3 new Star Wars games who have just been waiting to be put out of the gate, but haven't been allowed to do so. Well, that's probably not the case. I still really have my hopes high that the Ubisoft game is at least gonna get a proper announcement this year, with maybe a trailer, some gameplay, or, you know, something that we can look forward to. But it also worries me that there already seems to have been so many issues with the new Star Wars games, like the KOTOR remake, which was seemingly cancelled, but then seems to have been moved to a new studio, Star Wars Eclipse having massive development and hiring issues. Well, the list goes on, and I really hope that it's not going to be the case where we end up getting 3 or 4 of these 8 Star Wars games that are currently in the works. There was actually a report last year that Disney's plan is to put out 2 Star Wars games every year. One bigger AAA title, like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and one smaller game which I would imagine would be either a mobile game or simply not a $60 product. That's a pretty good cadence of games in my opinion. Not too much, not too little. The one thing that is still missing is a multiplayer game, something I can never wrap my head around how they are fumbling so bad with. Just looking at the Star Wars Battle Pass at Fortnite and how well that does. Imagine if that was a dedicated Star Wars game. Nope. We're gonna go from making multiplayer games to only like 8 different single player games. Such a squandered opportunity, but I still have my hopes up that at some point someone will realize, oh, a Star Wars multiplayer game. That might be a good idea. Anyways, this is truly the end of an era because the last 10 years I've been covering exclusively EA Star Wars games, and I started my channel in June 2013 when the first Battlefront game was announced, very shortly after the deal with Disney was made. Obviously, I've talked about other Star Wars games the last couple of years, but in terms of being able to play them, live stream them, actually covering them when they're out, it's gonna be fun to have so many different publishers and developers to cover and see how they handle their respective Star Wars projects. Of course, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga was a non-EA game, just to put that out there, and that worked really well, and they were great to work with on those exclusive gameplay opportunities I got. So I hope I will have similar opportunities in the future, no matter what publisher or developer that releases the game. Anyways, I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts on the last 10 years of Star Wars games? The ups, the downs, and what game are you most excited for in the next couple of years? Thank you very much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.